Her mom met me at the door and said she's in bed. She didn't want to come out of her bedroom. Those eyes. That's all she'd ever say was those eyes.
As writer John Keel puzzled over the exact nature and meaning of the creature sightings, he began to connect them with the dozens of local UFO reports he'd heard.
There was a man here from New York trying to find out as much as he could about the flying saucers.
Doris DeWeese was one of the people John tracked down and interviewed.
We lived on Madison Avenue over in Point Pleasant, and every night there'd be flying saucers going over. I was scared to death because, I mean, you know, we had no idea what they were going to do or what their intentions was. We figured they were from outer space or something.
That's where I first saw it at. Seen the lights rotating. It looked like it was about 4 feet high, maybe 6 or 8 foot wide. And the lights were multicolored, red and white, yellow, green. And it was just circulating like it wasn't making any noise. And it disappeared as quick as it appeared in the first place.
It's a long, cigar-shaped type vehicle that looked so close that you could look like you could just jump up and touch it. It had lights all on the side. It was completely silent, didn't make any noise whatsoever. We were just in awe. We just stood transfixed. We just couldn't believe that we were seeing what we were seeing.
UFO reports poured in, and the local media picked up on the frenzy.
This is desolate Dry Ridge Mountain, where last night a strange and eerie thing happened.
It was this big orange glowing light, you know. So we stopped the car and the thing came over top of the car. We got all kinds of static on the radio and the car quit.
John Keel himself witnessed these strange lights in the sky.
I began to see them myself. It was beyond imagination. They were extremely bright lights, which could hover. If you flashed a flashlight at them, they'd respond, they'd flash back. I saw a lot of these lights. In fact, I saw so many of them I lost count.
John Keel was at a loss to explain what was happening to the town, whether it was all connected, and why it was happening here, of all places.
To this day, we can't really tell you what those lights are.
Now improvised search parties are combing Dry Ridge Mountain, attempting to find it. Just what it is, no one is sure.
The community was on edge, afraid of the night and what it might bring.
They had the National Guard out looking for it. As state police was patrolling the area where it was seen. People would go out at night with lights and stuff. It was almost like a search for Frankenstein. Well, I wasn't with them. I was too scared to go at night.
But I know one thing, I lock my doors at night. I mean, you know, before, we never locked doors. We always left them unlocked, but after that, we started locking doors.
But other mysterious forces were at work in the town. Someone didn't want these stories to be told and threatened those who spoke. Who were these men in black? And why did they want to cover up the truth? Around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reports of creature sightings, UFOs, and strange phenomena continued for months.
I went back several times, you know. I wasn't there just once. I'd get back to New York, be exhausted, and the phone would ring, and somebody that I had met down there would be calling me and telling me about something new that had happened. I realized after a while that this was folklore in the making.
Alexander Leak. Who the hell are you? I'm John Klein. I called you last week. You know what that is? I'm sorry, but I'm already late. Look, I need to know what this is. Tell me. Where are they seeing it? Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Adding to the town's hysteria was the presence of mysterious visitors, strange men dressed in black, who didn't want the truth to be told.
And he said, "We don't want to hear any more about this," and he left. And so after he had said what he did, we didn't say any more about it.
A local newspaper columnist named Mary Heyer was helping John Keel with his investigations. She died soon after these events, before she could discover what was really going on.
Mary was the kind that would investigate anything that had a story to it. And this here was a story that she had to find the truth out about. And I believe she would have hunted and hunted and hunted for years until she found it. She's like Mr. Keel. He hunts for the truth, and she was too.
Mary was quite frightened. She was frightened for her life. She said these men had visited her quite a bit, and she said these men in black had olive complexion, and she noted one thing that I always thought was very strange. She said they didn't blink their eyes, and they would ask her questions about the Mothman.
Well, I've been around a lot of reporters in my life, and there are some I wouldn't play cards with, let alone accept their stories. Mary was very trustworthy.
She truly felt like they were a threat to her. And she felt like maybe it was because of the reporting that she was doing. And she wasn't sure whether they intended to make her stop but she was into this now and she wasn't going to give it up.
It's just something it's eerie. I don't know why they was coming around at that time, but they'd been in different homes, different places, asking questions.
But Keith Aker never expected anything to happen to him or his wife, Connie.
I'd come home, and she was scared. She wouldn't come out of the apartment. She wouldn't even answer the door, and I'm glad I had a key, because that's the only way I got in.
Keith found Connie cowering in the bedroom, and he slowly coaxed her into talking to him.
She went down that morning to get in the car, and some guy pulled up and asked her for directions. So she goes over, and he grabs her and tries to jerk her in the car. And she said he was dressed in black. I said, now this is too weird, but I know what took place. Because the blouse that she had was ripped, and she would not rip her clothes herself.
Not long after, a threatening note was left on Connie's front porch.
She more or less crawled into a shell. She didn't want to be by herself. She didn't want to go anywhere by herself.
Why wouldn't someone want you to talk about the Mothman? That's a good question. I really don't know. This whole business about men in black and silencing witnesses, you know, you have theorists who say it's the CIA.
But to this day, the government has denied any involvement in Point Pleasant.
Well, I called the Air Force in Columbus, Ohio, and he just sort of poo-pooed it, turned it off. And it's always been a puzzle.
Local residents began to ask why this would happen to Point Pleasant. And while some still dismissed the strange phenomena as the product of wild imaginations, sightings continued to be reported. Everett Wedge was one of the community's most upstanding and respected citizens. He was one of 5 pilots who were standing on a local airstrip when they saw what they described as an enormous dark-colored bird flying above them.
And it was big enough that it could, I'd say it could pick me or you up and probably carry us away. That's how big it was. I've been around lots of my time, and I never ever saw a bird that big, but I did see it. And like I say, might not have quite 20 eyes now, but I did then.
At 7:15 a.m. on November 25th, a shoe salesman named Tom Urey was driving just north of the TNT area.
I noticed something out of the corner of my eye from the riverbank over here, and it came up over the trees, and when I first saw it, it looked like a helicopter coming up. And then when it came up over the trees, I could see it was a bird, a huge bird. Estimating the wingspan, I would say 10 to 12 feet, give or take on either end, up to 15. I'd never seen anything that large before in my life. I was scared, but I wasn't terrified. It was just a strange feeling. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. I hope I never do again, you know. It was just unbelievable.
And a few months later, the local Red Cross bloodmobile was chased by the creature.
And this thing hovered over the bloodmobile. First they sensed it, and then they looked out the windows and looked up, and whatever it was a huge thing. And they thought that some like claw-like things were descending and going to grab the bloodmobile. And he drove out of there. Then there were a number of other cases that tied it in with blood. What cinched it for me was in talking to female witnesses, I would ask them about their menstrual period. And a lot of these women who claimed to have been chased in automobiles were having their menstrual period at the time. And that seemed to me to be a major clue of some sort.
Reports of missing dogs and mutilated cattle only serve to heighten fears.
Usually the animal has been drained of blood, but there's another clue to these animal mutilations is that very often the anus of the cow is removed, and we know that radioactivity settles in the anus, and whoever's doing it is checking the radioactivity influencing these animals.
Obviously, something was happening here, something unexplainable and terrible. But no one at the time had the foresight to understand exactly how horrific it would eventually turn out to be. Dozens of innocent people would die before the truth was known.
How many people have seen it? 10, 20 maybe. Listen to me. Something terrible is going to happen in Point Pleasant. Don't go back. Stay away.
The strange phenomena continued in Point Pleasant for over a year. By December 1967, over 100 sightings of the creature had been reported. And people weren't just seeing it, they were dreaming about it. Eyewitnesses complained of nightmares and dark premonitions.
If you look at some of these winged wonders, these creatures, like Mothman, like the Cornwall Owlman, like the Thunderbirds, there's this interwoven kind of tradition that they're banshees, that they really are the prophets of doom in many ways.
There are the old legends, if a bird looks in your window, you're in trouble, big trouble.
You read in some of the traditions of the Cherokee where there's actually warriors and braves guarding the women when there was a Thunderbird time. In Cornwall and some of the Owlman reports, if somebody was going to get in an auto crash or, a kid was going to die.
I was getting anonymous phone calls and could never figure that out. I was getting phone calls warning me about this and that.
Hello, John Klein.
Who is this?
My name is Ingrid Cole.
But yours is way down here in the normal vocal range, anywhere between 1,000 or 1,200 cycles per second.
Okay, so this guy's vocal range is much higher than mine.
What makes you think it's a man? What is it? Near as I can tell, it's an electrical impulse.
Mary Heyer, the reporter friend of John Keel, had these dreams, incredible dreams in which she saw Christmas packages in the water, but she had this feeling there was going to be a major disaster and it was going to happen any time.
But no one expected the tragedy that followed. Almost 13 months to the day of the first sighting of the creature, disaster struck.
I was planning to go back down to West Virginia in December of that year, and I had repeated phone calls warning me, don't go to West Virginia, because they knew that I would be using the bridge, whoever they were.
Main Street in Point Pleasant led straight onto a suspension bridge called the Silver Bridge. Spanning the Ohio River, locals would cross it on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day. At 5:05 p.m. on December 15, 1967, the bridge was full of cars.